the four themes that I've noticed in my life when it comes to dealing with cisgendered straight people is that LGBTQ is an adult topic. Um, kids can kids are too young to learn about LGBTQ stuff. Um, kids would be confused about LGBTQ stuff, and that those two actually might be put together, but I saw them as two separate. We'll see how the conversation goes. And I've heard people try to make the argument, well, being gay isn't your whole identity, so why are you trying to make it your whole identity? I've heard both people from the rainbow as well as straight people say that to me, and I can see why an LGBT person could say that. But I think that cisgendered straight people really need to watch out when talking, when saying that to, an LGBT person. It comes in that way where we can say it because we're coming from that lived experience, but uh, someone on the outside, someone on the side where they are the majority, they are the ones in power, may not want to say that, and I can explain why. Um, but let's start with, I guess, the first three. LGBTQ is an adult topic. Um, kids can be too young, and kids could be confused. So I can deal directly with my own experience with that. I noticed so every LGBTQ adult was an LGBTQ kid. We didn't make a choice about it. It wasn't a phase. So you'll hear, we rainbow kids will hear, oh, it's just a phase, or that, oh, it's a choice. No. For the congregation, and I'm pretty sure that if not everyone in our congregation, but the majority already, know this aspect of it. But my question to you, if you are questioning about that, is when did you choose to be cisgendered and straight? And I actually use that for my anti-LGBT people that come at me, and it just stops them. So if you want, a game stopper for someone trying to come at you with anti-LGBT rhetoric, hold up. Well, then tell me exactly the time and date of when you chose to be cisgendered and straight. And there's a long pause or a lot of stuttering because I think that's where it starts. That's where the conversation needs to start, to bring it to, their own lived experience. And they'll quickly realize that they didn't. So just like with rainbow, I'm going to say rainbow people for LGBT because it, comes off the tongue faster for me. But for rainbow people, we notice it's not something that we choose. It's something that we notice from a very young age. And it depends on the person. I've had a boyfriend where he didn't realize he was, a rainbow person until he was in high school. So, but for me, I noticed a little bit before elementary school. I noticed that I had more of an attraction towards the same sex than the opposite sex. And this is where I'm going to mix the themes that I talked about. Being confused, that was confusing because we like to think that we don't teach kids about sexuality or gender, but we do in our everyday life. And the things that they're being taught about automatically is straight cisgender coupling. And so when with me noticing things, I automatically thought that's not supposed to be, right? I'm not supposed to have these feelings um for another guy, for another, boy, elementary at the time. So yeah, it can get confusing if you're being forced into a mold. And for many and for most LGBT people, we're being forced into a mold. So that's where the confusion comes in. And we can talk more about that, especially with, kids coming out more within a more friendlier landscape. But I was confused. There was a lot of self-hate because I can't really remember when I was told specifically that God hates gays, that you'll go to hell. But I knew that. I knew it. So it must have come somewhere. And, a lot of our culture just kind of seeps in without people realizing it. So that's one thing that we have to realize. We're taught that you're supposed to be a straight person, a cisgendered person, and that gays are going to hell. Um, so yeah, that's where confusion comes in. And it's mostly for the LGBT kids, not for the straight kids. Uh, and I remember in elementary school, so my brother and I, we were born in Germany, moved to Virginia, our first state in the US, and then we moved to California when I was 5. So when we were in California, we lived in Vallejo, and I went to Wardlaw Elementary School. Um, I say this because I know people are like super close by, and so they probably recognize that. But in elementary school, I had crushes on boys. So, and that was weird. I would say that, oh, I just want to be friends with them, really good friends with them. Um, and every kid, older cousins, because LGBT rainbow people weren't really talked about in a positive light or just talked about at all specifically, I learned as a kid, oh, that's gay. Oh, oh, that's kind of fruity. Oh, don't be a faggot. You would hear that, and it's always in terms of negativity. Um, and there's still a lot of people, specifically I've seen within, our male demographic using that. And then when I said something, it's, well, we don't actually mean like gay people, not gay gay. It means stupid gay. Oh, a gay person is telling you that's damaging to us, and you're like, as a straight person, telling me that that doesn't track. And I know what that leads to is because, as a kid, that's the only exposure we get, the negativity towards it. And it is linked to, male and male. So you can't tell me that it's something different. So that's one thing growing up, that had to deal with the confusion, just being taught, even not, if not specifically, it seeps down and we don't realize it. And you don't realize it unless you really kind of, unless you're lucky or you have exposure to a diversity of things, you don't realize it as someone who's outside of that minority group. But, I had to rainbow people kind of have to face that from the get-go. And for me, that was elementary school. So, um, and so with that, we grew up with the same things, or I grew up with the same things. So you have to have a girlfriend and you have to get married. So elementary, middle school, and high school girlfriends happened. And people would point that to that and be like, well, you've dated girls before. Um, but I'm not sure about any other LGBT people, but for me, it was kind of like everyone had Jordan's shoe brand. And so even if I didn't like it, I got it because everyone was getting it. It was kind of like that. It's a horrible way to explain that about people, but that's the only way I can put words to how that felt. Oh, I checked off a box that everyone was doing. Um, but the natural attraction didn't stop. I mean, I should have guessed because most of my picks were like, oh, I really like her because she's really intelligent. And yes, we should, pick people based on personality traits, but I mean, yeah, that should have been a sign because, it's not of the natural attraction. It was because I was picking off a resume choice. So, another thing that I noticed, growing up was when we played a lot of video games, I would always choose the women characters. So if you are a fan of Mario Kart or Mario, I always picked Princess Peach. Any of the side-scrolling fighting games, I always picked the women. And people noticed, but it was just what I did. So yeah, it wasn't until middle school where I finally got the language where I was finally like seeing, kind of coming to terms that yeah, I might actually be way more different than I thought I was. And this is where the harm comes in with not talking specifically about LGBT and their existence to kids. Is because in middle school, I remember dreading, I would have what do you call that? Insomnia and a fear of death because I thought I'm going to hell. I'm gay and I'm going to hell. And I would stay up at night crying, thinking, God, why can't I be normal? Why can't I have a normal life? I'm never going to have that white picket fence with the wife and two kids. I don't know why I thought that, but it was, I don't even know where I got that as a middle schooler. But, like I said, things come to us and we don't know when or where, but if things are said to kids or it's, around us, we pick it up. So I thought I was going to die, and I, I had depression, I had anxiety, I had extreme fear, and at one point, I could literally feel I was burning. That might just have been the lack of sleep, as well as the, whirlpool of thinking that I'm going to go to hell and I can't change. God, can you change me? So, yeah, I do think that when it comes to LGBTQ stuff and when it comes to kids, if it's not handled appropriately, yeah, there will be confusion. And the issue isn't whether they're going to go back and forth. The issue is whether a rainbow kid's going to think that they don't deserve love, that they're going to go to hell, that there's something wrong with them. So, on the topic of rainbow is an adult topic, on the idea that kids are too young to learn about LGBTQ stuff. No, I think it's really important. It's, and I push that as an educator that there's an exposure. Now, I'm not saying that there's ways to talk about rainbow stuff. Like there's stuff to talk about straight people. You don't go into the specific details on how straight people have sex. They do the bump. But when you say a mommy and a dad, when a mommy and daddy love each other, they have kids. I mean, like the same language could be used for LGBTQ kids. Like you're not saying, oh, when a man and a man have sex and they, go behind doors. No, when a man and a man love each other, have romantic feelings for each other, that's when you're considered gay. And for the other acronyms in the rainbow acronym collection, the LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, the same language can be used even at elementary school, which needs to be taught at elementary school because like I said, I noticed something different, and that's when some of the anxiety started. So it's really important. um so yeah, let me see. uh uh so middle school passed, high school came around, and I had more opportunities to explore what it meant to be LGBTQ. I think there's a stereotype, and it's a horrible stereotype specifically for bisexual people, that you only really say you're bisexual just to get your foot in the door because you're not too sure if you want to really fully come out. Now, um, I think that's what I did, and it wasn't a planned thing. Things were happening, and I said, "Well, I think I'm bisexual," because I didn't want to disappoint my family, and I didn't. But I knew I wasn't fully like normal. So I said I was bisexual. But really, after I entered that door, I just went flying through. It was just a pride parade all over the place. So I had boyfriends in high school, a lot of exploration, and that's, especially in Vallejo, it's really surprising to me now, and I think about it. how much different Vallejo is compared to now. Because when I did the couple things that every couple did, straight couple did, which was, and I hate this about this, the kids nowadays, like PDA, a lot of public display of affection, a lot of hugging and all of the awkward kissing. I did what any other straight, teenage couple did, but the difference was, I got water bottles thrown at me. You'd get people calling you faggot. Out in public, this was horrible because these were full on adults. I was holding I was holding hands with, my high school boyfriend at the time, and we were passing by in the Target Plaza in Vallejo. We were just walking towards what is now Black Bear Diner, and a van pulls up. The sliding doors open, and this full-grown adult female is like saying, "Get females, faggots!" And they quickly zoom off. And it was just all, a lot of that from the adults in the community. We would go into Target. I can't believe Target's been there for so long. But holding my boyfriend's hand, and this, I remember this old lady like following us and like just looking at her like as I'm passing her by. It looked like this. So it's really changed in the past, within my lifetime. Um, I always felt like I had to hide, and just in those days, and I still feel it, but to less intensity now, that I need to be ready. I need to keep myself safe. I can't take things for granted. The only place that I've ever felt like I could take things for granted, I, basically let my hair down, is in San Francisco, especially during Pride Month. And then within, the most recent years at Crosswalk, because Crosswalk is just so welcoming. So, but in every, no matter where I go, I'm always thinking, even if there's no opportunity for me to say anything about me being gay, which comes up a lot and people don't realize it, um, I have to be ready. I have to check you out, and I have to be ready to basically write you off if you're anti, LGBT. I have to be, me now. I'm ready to tell you about yourself and tell you how stupid you are. Back, years before, I would prepare myself to basically exit or try to argue and try to convince, that person, or just to mitigate the damage. But now I'll tell you about yourself and how stupid you sound. So there's always that underlying fear. There's always that underlying readiness to go to battle. Um, and I hear from a lot of straight people, specifically from, more right-leaning places. Well, you don't, why do you have to make it a thing? Why do you always have to talk about it? Why do you always have to make that a big part of your identity? Well, you don't realize that how many people have asked me about my wife, or when I didn't have a ring on my finger, oh, so I mean, like, you need to act this way, so otherwise, how can you get a girlfriend? First off, any girl is not going to be man enough for me. Second, my husband's going to be really weirded out about my wife. Yeah. So the topic of sexuality comes up naturally in the questions that I feel that straight cisgendered people take for granted and don't even realize it happens. At restaurants, I'm not sure if straight people get this, but we're always asked one bill or two. Do you get that, Pete? No? We always get that. I mean, we were in Italy, and I'll joke around. Daryl did a dine and dash. Uh, he didn't really, but what had happened was we went to an ice cream shop, and they didn't speak English. We didn't speak Italian, but point, and they can give us a price. So I got my ice cream. Daryl got his ice cream. They gave me a price. I was like, that's cheaper than I thought it would be. I paid. We both walked out. We walked in and we were ordering together. So I assumed that they understood. But Daryl got chased down by one of the ice cream people. So we now know why the ice cream was so cheap was because they thought we were going to pay separately. And they only charged me for mine. So Daryl's a criminal and he got chased down. So I just want everybody to know that. But no, we often get asked, um, together separate. Um, I'm not sure if straight people have gotten this at the doctors, but I would tell the doctor I've been in a monogamous relationship, I'm married. Oh, but we're going to give you an AIDS test anyways. And the same doctor, I've told her several times. I always want to ask, like, do you say this to I actually did ask her, like, do you say this to your straight patients? She was like, no. And I mean, you can always go with the argument that, LGBT population has a higher risk of, AIDS, but you're that argument isn't, you're not making that individualized. You're stereotyping us. Yes, we might, on um a proportional scale, experience that, but like you got to take it on a case by case basis. And I tell you, I'm monogamous. I tell you that we've always come out clean, and you keep asking me every time I visit you, every 6 months. Come on. So stuff like that. When we couldn't give blood because we were LGBT, that made me angry. My blood's not good enough. It was the same. I mean, the same reason as oh, the LGBT population um have that higher proportion of AIDS. Well, you can test the blood. You can test the blood. Just don't deny me outright. So things like that. Yeah. Uh, what else? Oh, so going back to growing up, I remember in high school, along with getting bottles thrown at us, a lot of harassment. There was one time where I was waiting at the theater and I was just standing there. I didn't have my boyfriend at the time with me. I was just waiting for my ride. And then a Ford Taurus comes up, 4 or 5 big dudes roll down their windows and they start harassing me. I don't know if I was, wearing something that indicated that I was, gay, or if I was standing a certain way, but one of them yelled out, "Hey, are you gay?" Uh, I, didn't know how to answer that. Yes, but like you're screaming it outside of a window in a not very friendly culture. And so him and his friends, they were just, they're laughing and, they're like, "Oh, this dude's gay. This dude's gay." And they went around the, several times doing the same thing. "Hey, you a faggot. Hey, you gay. Hey, you a faggot." So I think for me, that was the more dangerous experiences that I've had other than having bottles thrown. Um, I also remember when I was in high school thinking, looking at a map, other than San Francisco, where can I live? I can't move out of California because everywhere else hates me and wants to kill me. I remember looking at the different countries. And at the time, I didn't know that there were several countries moving more progressively. But, from a high school perspective, from a teenager perspective, I thought everywhere wants to kill me. And there are still countries that me and Daryl can't visit today because it's illegal. When we went to Costa Rica just this last week, we were talking with several straight people from Canada. Yes, they told us that Americans that they came across were apologizing to them, so we decided not to apologize to them. But they were talking about places that they've been on. "Oh, you should go visit this place. This is great." And they were talking about Cuba. Interesting. I was like, "Oh, we could visit Cuba." We had a whole conversation about that. Like, can we visit Cuba or no? But they also said Jamaica and a few other places. And I know that, or, from what I heard with the most recent information about Jamaica, it's still illegal to be gay. I might be wrong about that. I'm just letting you know I might not be updated on that, but the last time I saw, we could be arrested. So we can't go to Jamaica. And the other countries we had to ask, do you know if it's gay friendly? And the straight people, the people we met were like, oh, I don't know. I mean, didn't think about to ask that. So same with the adoption process. Quite a few people are surprised that some countries will not adopt out to us because we're a gay couple. You know, I can't remember. I Daryl was the one that told me which countries we couldn't. Obviously Russia, some of the African countries. I think the Philippines won't adopt out to us. So those are some considerations as a gay couple, as gay adults that we have to think about. We can't just willy-nilly go places. And it's not just gay people that can't do that. I know that women unattended or unaccompanied can't go to certain countries too. So, it's not just the LGBT community that's having to deal with that. But if we wanted to move somewhere or visit somewhere, that's something we had to think about. We have to think about. So, I mean, even when we went to Peru, last minute, I realized, oh, crap, am I going to get arrested? So, luckily, no. So, obviously, I'm back in the States. So, in terms of uh, in terms of churches, and Pete, you've heard me before, and a few of you in the audience have heard my story. There were I've always had kind of a tenuous relationship with the church. I was not one to just sit and be like, "Oh yeah, that whatever you tell me sounds correct." I've always had issues with the Trinitarian doctrine. I've always had issues with the idea that if you know, you have to accept Jesus as your savior, otherwise you'd go to hell. Which, okay, what about all the people before Jesus or when he lived? I mean, like Native Americans would never hear about Jesus. But along with that came the LGBT question. And you would get, as a high schooler, I would get the answer from a friend who super church going, super always in youth ministry. Well, you have to try harder. Try harder. Well, my answer would be like, okay, then go kiss a boy. Try harder. Really try to see if your attraction to someone will actually change. So, but my mom was a non-denom Christian, so we used to go to a church called Church on the Hill in Vallejo. For those of you who know Vallejo, that was near where Springstown Middle School used to be, which is now Vallejo Charter School. So it's Church on the Hill, large congregation. I might define it as a mega church. I think the numbers were that big, but um, no LGBT stuff came up until 2008, because we went there for a few years, and then 2008 happened. And in 2000, I think it was in 2008 where Prop 8 was happening. So uh, Prop 8 was I think it was an amendment to our California Constitution to recognize that marriage was only between a male and a female. So one day at church, and this was after I was dragged out of the closet. I can talk about my experience with being dragged out of the closet for my family. Um, but the pastor started talking about uh, Prop 8, and he did a prayer saying, not verbatim. I can't tell you guys verbatim because that was long ago. It was a dramatic event. But he prayed that that God would give guidance to the judges. to keep marriage traditional. And he got a standing ovation. So these are hundreds of people standing up, clapping, cheering. And there were, from my where I could see, only four people still seated. And now I think the other two people that were in front of us, I think they were a gay couple. Um, or they were, just not in alignment with, what they were saying. I like to think that they were a gay couple, but my mother and I were not standing. And, you know, at, we left that service and I told my mom I don't want to go back again. And my mom never really went back there again either, because of that. Just just to think about that. I mean, um, and I'm looking back now just to think about all this time. I'm thinking people want me dead. People don't want me to exist. And before that time, it was just conjecture from the small bits and pieces that I've experienced from people throwing bottles at me or saying something. But to have hundreds of people get up and applaud the death of your own rights, like I couldn't go back into church like fully after that. So yeah. And so, even if I did attend churches, it was always be in the back. I'm trying to hear, I'm trying to see, I'm trying to, figure out if it's a gay friendly church. Most of the time I knew, but I didn't want to be separated from a place of worship. I used to go to Northgate a lot, but in Bonita, and my mom took us there, and it was a really great experience. And during one sermon, the pastor had talked about at the end that people were bullying others just for being different, different gender, different race, or, even transgender people. And I thought, hey, maybe this church is great. And I don't remember why I was at a second service. So, the first and the second service are going to have the same, but he excluded the trans part at the second part. I was like, huh. And then I heard from who's now a teacher friend. He's a pastor at a Presbyterian church as well as being a teacher, but he would go to Northgate, at the same time as us. And he made a comment saying that part of the congregation took issue with that, and that's why he left it out. So after seeing that response, the next time I fine, went in, the worship part of the service started. So the singing, the lights go down, light is only on the stage. And I'm looking around and I think to myself, these people want me dead. And I just couldn't shake it. I was, I felt deep sorrow and deep fear. I thought, and all I could see was all these, darkened faces, all these enemies that want me dead. And I had to leave. I left the service crying. Like they were still singing. I couldn't even get to the sermon. I couldn't be there around enemies, people who want me dead, people who want to snuff out my existence. So and that's what led me to looking for gay friendly churches. Like finally I was like, I don't want to keep doing this. So yeah. um I did a lot of shopping around. There were like maybe five congregations in Vallejo, all very tiny. All and so me being wanting to go in the back, every time I walked into a new one, it was like 6 to 10 people, and they would all look at me. I was like, oh crap. And like I was the brownest one there. It was really obvious that I was new. It was really obvious. So yeah. And when I went to Crosswalk, um I mean, our diversity isn't, that much, but it's not for lack of trying, I don't think. But like oftentimes I am still the most, the brownest one in the congregation, but I see that there are more and more darker skin tones there. Um, but when I walked in, my go-to strategy is go in the back, get in, get out, see about it. But I didn't walk to pews. I didn't walk into a room full of pews where I could do that. I walk in and there's these tables and all the chairs were facing inward. And I was like, ah, shit. Okay, let me sit in the back. So I'm coming in with high anxiety because of my experience. But Crosswalk appeared on gaychurch.org, and that's why, that's how I got the other five churches in Vallejo, and Crosswalk was one of the, was the sixth that I had went to. Um, yeah, so I thought I picked the most empty chair, but it quickly filled up. And I do think one of the first people that I met was Ellie. And, with me being high anxiety, and Pete, you were up on the stage, I wasn't fully understanding everything because number one, people are talking, and number two, um, you did what every pastor does that I hate in every church. Okay, turn to your neighbor. Oh, dang it. I don't want to talk to anyone. It's the worst thing ever. So anxiety is building up. And then Ellie makes a joke at me, not you know, in any bad way, but she said something about the Catholic Church. I think it was Ellie. It was something about the Catholic Church. She made a joke and I couldn't understand. And I think she saw that and she said something else. My anxiety brain couldn't understand that, what she said afterwards. And I almost didn't go back because I was so embarrassed. But yeah, but I'm glad that I kept going. Because I don't even remember when I found out Crosswalk was a gay friendly church. Um, but it sure was quick because we had you, Pete. I had asked if we could have you as our pastor to marry us. So, and I know that was a bad story, Ellie, but just know that I love you. But and it was just the confluence of things. There was nothing against you. It was just the confluence of things coming in. I came in with baggage, so. But it took me a while to, I think it took years to recognize that Crosswalk was a safe space because of what I had experienced. But I think the nail in the coffin was like, you know, when we got married. So it was during the fire season, but we got married in the fireside room, and you oversaw that. You did your priestly duties, and I think Daryl and I were so caught up with planning, we didn't actually do practice. And so Dar, came in and, told us what to do. And she, like, at the door, Daryl was already in there. Dar said, "This is what you're going to do." And she gave me the rundown. I was like, ah. So you and Dar, the church, are very integral to our marriage story. And Crosswalk has really become our church family. And I never thought I would say that. Because, I mean, in the past, churches haven't been very kind. Um, and just having all that, just put aside the support for a minute, all that recognition of, people, there are different people, all that welcoming of, different people and who they are, along with all the support. I mean, like, I feel spoiled. So when we go visiting to other churches, if we're out of town, I'm kind of like, well, I'm not going to settle for anything. But yeah, I think one of my bragging stories about our church is, when I tell people who are, who my friends who are in Vallejo and friends outside, or even my uh, in-laws, like, yeah, our church really puts its money where its mouth is. I mean, our pastor got fired from the region, so that he could marry us. And I say that as a joke, but it really says a lot. And I've been wanting to tell you this, Pete, that I think that's that it's not kind of, it's really a mark of a true ally. Because while the church itself, might have been split from the region, you were the one that had to take that in person, right? You were the one that had to hear those words from people who before were smiling and joking and were friends with you, and then all of a sudden they turn their back. And I think a lot of cisgender straight people don't realize how damaging that is as an LGBT person. Is we go into a church, you hear God loves all, Jesus loves you, God loves all, everyone. Oh, you're gay? That smile turns instantly into a frown and instantly into hostility. And I think you experienced that, and you didn't have to. Most straight people don't have to. And even, as an ally, people can face it, realize they don't like it, and then step down from having to face that. But, time and time again, um, just more rainbows started coming up. And the church did experience something of the rejection when we got graffitied, but a new one came back up. So, um, thank you for, you know, having such a loving and embracing congregation, or for fostering that, cultivating that, for being you. Thank you, Dar. You've been integral in our, in our marriage too, Dar. Um, Crosswalk is our church family, for, many reasons. Not only just, because you all decided, yeah, we're gonna yeet this organization and go to a different one, but just for, all the different, you know, personal relationships that have developed, as time went on too. But yeah.
This is so good, and thank you so much for being vulnerable and transparent. And um, you and Daryl are a massive part of my story. Uh, and I was open to doing a same gender marriage, um, for years before you guys came along. But there was a part of me was like, well, I don't want, because there are a lot of tourists that come to Napa to get married, and I was like, that would be a kind of a bummer. I mean, it would be cool no matter what, because I do a number of those. But I'm so glad that it was you guys, because your story and you're part of us, you are us, and yeah, it's deeply meaningful, and it was a great honor to do it. And still is, as I think about that. So thank you for the honor of letting me do that. It means a lot to me, and it will for my life, for my entire life. So we appreciate it. So you can't leave. That's the moral of the story.
Well, I always forget to add at the end too. Like, I said that I don't like the part where the pastors say, "All right, turn to your neighbor." I don't like that part. But I think we've gone past. For me personally, I've gone past from sitting in the back and not talking to no one to, I ended up on stage several times. I'm sure if you show this video, it counts as being on stage too. But we've fostered a lot of relationships here. I no longer dislike. It sounds like a bratty thing to say, but I like seeing everybody. I like going up to people and talking to everyone, and yeah.
Cool. Well, you're not alone. My wife hates that too. Absolutely hates it. least favorite thing, the thing she likes even less is if it's more than hi, if I like have a question of the day or something. Oh my gosh, she just absolutely hates it. She's an introvert. She's like, I'm not, this is small talk. We don't need to be doing this. So, and I think about half the people are that way. So that's why we don't do it a whole lot anymore, because it's the value add is pretty liminal or pretty minimal.
Hmm.
So, kind of a final question. You've answered this, roundabout ways, but part of the reason why we're doing this has to do with capital campaign and supporting that and all that. So, in light of all that you've experienced and what you found at Crosswalk, why would you encourage anybody to dig a little deeper to make sure that Crosswalk keeps going on in strength?
There are not a so selfishly, there are not a lot of churches. And I can say this: mainstream Christianity is not very welcoming. You will not find a lot of mega churches, a lot of churches in general that will support openly LGBTQ stuff. I mean, we just the other day, I was counting how many times you said diversity and LGBT stuff and minority stuff, and I lost count after all my hands and toes. And you don't see that in different congregations. What you'll hear is you need to have right belief, have a transformative relationship with Jesus, and believe in Jesus. But you talk a lot about the mission that Jesus taught, a lot of what Jesus, was doing and wanted, was as he was walking around preaching to people, you really hone in on that, and that really shows with the openness of the congregation. So I have a stake in wanting people to donate more to the capital campaign and keeping, Crosswalk going, because it's one of the few refuges. It's one of the few lighthouses that is shines a beacon out in a world that seems to be going darker and darker. It Crosswalk allows LGBTQ people and minorities to really let down their hair and actually be themselves. Because, like I said, in most places now, um, I'm 35-year-old adult, going on 36 next year as being a gay person. I still have, we still have that, clinch, that being prepared for fight or flight. But in Crosswalk, it's one of the extreme safe spaces. And with, not only is it a refuge where you can let your hair down, Crosswalk uh, is involved with a whole bunch of community stuff. So we're not just sitting there on the property. Keaton and Dar are out there in the community. I mean, just like you said, you went to the Pride Commission in Napa. You partner with a lot of, feeding people, housing people. We open our doors. We're, like you guys said, we're the first to open and the last to close down when an emergency happens. And while that's happening, the flag is flying. And some people might see that and be like, "Oh, okay, whatever. This is a refuge." But like for any LGBT person that sees that, or any straight person, cisgender straight person sees that, that could be the turning point for some people. Knowing for LGBT rainbow people, there we go. For rainbow people, when an emergency happens, they know that they're safe and that they can be themselves. Someone's going to say something and they won't be alone. So not only do we want to keep this refuge going, it's the culture changer. Crosswalk is influencing the culture. Crosswalk is really, helping change the climate on social issues, on making people feel seen and feel safe and feel like you can exist in this world. So, and I think that's really important nowadays because if you're not a straight white male, sorry, Pete, I'm sorry, everybody else, you're kind of under attack. Like, I mean, even with Trump becoming in president, so politics, a lot of people feel emboldened to be, really shitty towards minorities. I know that as a teacher going to conferences, all these teachers are, especially in SoCal, are saying we're getting hit with people who either don't live in the community or don't even have a stake in the schools, going to school boards and really harassing inclusive policies. And now what gets me is like these, some of these people are not even in, part of the district or not even part of the state. It's a political campaign, and you're dealing with kids. You're fucking with kids. You understand that when you go into these places and you're attacking inclusivity, you're attacking kids because it's kids who are being saved by inclusive policies. It's kids who are going to be hurt if they're taken, and it's the LGBTQ kids that have twice as have a factor of twice as more likely to suffer depression and suicidal ideation, because not only do they have to deal with everything that straight cisgender kids have to deal with, but also that increased bullying. I mean, in the foster care systems, LGBTQ are overly represented. I think they represent half of the foster care system. So what does that mean? These kids are getting kicked out. So there are different areas in which inclusion can be strengthened from school districts, from workplaces. But with crosswalk, I think that's where it also needs to start, because the church being a moral symbol, a symbol of morality, a symbol of spirituality, a symbol of, you know, this is a house of worship, a house of God. It's important. It's important to have that, because you can do it in the workplace, you can do it in the schools. Those are great and fine. But when you link it up with the church, that's where it kind of starts to get rid of that, that argument that like God doesn't want it. No, that's not the conversation that God was having. That's not the conversation we're going to have, that we're going to exclude people. So I think it's important um, for us to keep crosswalk in the game, to keep crosswalk, as a place of refuge and a beacon in this dark world. So